You're tuning in to another episode of Unmasking Autism with AFO. I am your host, Carley Marissa Dummett. This podcast does discuss topics and themes that may be triggering to some listeners, so viewer discretion is advised. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Unmasking Autism with AFO. I have another wonderful guest here with me today, Michi Medley.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
I am Michi Medley. I am a parent of 3 children. 2 are on the spectrum. One is profoundly affected by autism and nonverbal. He's 18. And then my youngest is 9 and was just recently diagnosed last year, and he has very mild autism. In fact, I didn't even notice it myself, so it was that mild. So it's interesting having 2 boys on the opposite ends of the spectrum. It's also interesting because my oldest, Rob, was diagnosed when he was 2, which is 2008. How different things are now than they were back then. Going through the process with my younger one, who was just diagnosed last year. So I've also worked in the community, doing direct care mostly. I've also worked with nonprofits, but I've moved to direct care, and I'm now working in mental health with a hope to work with children and caregivers who have autism.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today, is your parent caregiver perspective and more about profound autism. So for people who may be watching who don't know or understand what profound autism is, can you just go into a little bit about that?
Well, when Rob was diagnosed, the DSM was a bit different. It was, and I know we've gotten rid of the term Asperger's, which is fine with me. But back then, autism was mostly profoundly affected children. And profoundly affected does not mean nonverbal. It has to do with how it impacts their life. With Rob, he is nonverbal. He also has apraxia. So he probably will never be verbal, though he can communicate using iPad, but it affects pretty much every aspect of his life. He's going to need care all through his life. We've worked really hard we did early intervention, and we provided, therapy and support, but we are aware that he's probably going to need support all through his life. Whereas my younger one, who has higher functioning autism, pretty much is self-sufficient. He didn't even need an IEP this year, so big differences in skill sets. So
yeah. And you said your oldest son is nonverbal but can communicate with an iPad. I personally think that there's a stereotype in the autistic community where people assume that if a person with autism is nonverbal, that means there's kind of nothing happening. Yeah. So from your own experience, can you just kind of talk about that, shatter that stigma a little bit? Because that's completely untrue, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And that was something that was really frustrating because it felt like when he was young that was sort of the goal to make, that he had to have words. Everything else was kind of secondary to he had to speak. And even as parents, at that time they had this idea of, you had this 3-year window, which I cannot stand, because we know now with research that, kids can make progress all through the lifespan. Mm-hmm. But we focused a lot on language acquisition, and it was all over the place at that time. So they were teaching him sign, which with apraxia, sign is just as difficult as saying words because it's motor planning. It took us a while to get that diagnosis of apraxia because obviously, with the diagnosis of autism, they just want to say, well, this is just autism.
Yeah.
Which happens with a lot of everything he has. But finally, when he was sort of kind of around 10-ish, we just sort of made peace with the fact that, he may never talk. He makes approximations. I believe in total communication, first off. Like, he can communicate however he wants. Mm-hmm. And I also, I know a lot of the therapists would say, don't, have him request stuff. No, if he wants to get something out of the cupboard and he can do it himself, go for it. He's 18 years old. I'm not going to stop and make him request. I believe cognitively, Rob is way more advanced than people give him credit for because he's nonverbal. And I don't think that's fair because, I think it's all in there. He just can't make that connection. It's similar with him. My dad had a stroke. And the way my dad explained it when he was actually having his stroke is the lid of his coffee fell on the ground. And he went to go pick it up, and his brain knew that he wanted to pick it up, but he could not make the movement to pick it up. And when he told me that, I was like, that reminds me of Rob, because you can see Rob trying to move his lips to make the words, and it's just the connection's not there. So it's not that he doesn't want to talk, because I think a lot of times, it's like, oh, he doesn't have the motivation. No. The motivation's there. He just can't make the words. So he tells us in other ways. He will use gestures, approximations, the iPad, but I will say his receptive language, because there's the expressive and the receptive, his receptive language is amazing. Like, if you ask him to do something, he'll do it. So he understands everything you say. Yeah. And that's what, because people treat him like, I actually had one head of school ask me if he could hear. I was like, yes, he can hear. He just can't talk. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, he understands everything you say. So really, we don't know exactly where his IQ is at, or where he is cognitively, because it's really difficult to test somebody who is nonverbal and also has autism and learns differently. He also has severe OCD, so he's really difficult to test. So, yeah.
But again, I do just want to reiterate more for the people listening. He's living a full life. He's like you said, the head of the school. Oh, can he hear? Well, just because he can't speak doesn't mean he's deaf, right? And I like the example that you gave of your father having a stroke. I'd never thought of it that way, but I do see that stereotype perpetuated on the internet, and I do see content that tries to, break out of that stereotype that just because a person is nonverbal doesn't mean that they're stupid. It doesn't mean they're not experiencing an emotional, internal life. And like you said, you believe in total communication. So for someone who may not understand what you mean by that, what do you mean by total communication?
Any way Rob wants to communicate to us, he can. Sometimes it's nonverbal, like all of it's nonverbal communication, but sometimes he'll gesture. He also is very into music, which we see with a lot of kids with profound autism. For some reason, singing's a little easier for him. When he was 15 months old, he would hum Mozart, and it was incredible. Like, he's really into those Baby Einstein videos, and so he would repeat the song perfectly. And I didn't know what he was doing. It was a speech path that picked up on it. He still does this. It's music to him. I guess it's easier for him to process. So he sings a lot, and he's got perfect pitch, perfect tone. It's beautiful. And so, I feel like that's a mode of communication too. But it's, I know a lot of people are like, you need to just use sign. You need to just use PECs. You just need to use the iPad. And there's moments where maybe it's difficult to grab the iPad. So if he wants to point to something, or if he wants to say no or yes, which he can do, we'll accept anything.
Oh yeah, well, why wouldn't you accept it? If that's how he communicates, then why wouldn't you accept it?
Yeah. It used to be there were some therapies that were, you have to pick a mode, and that's the mode you use. But we've never, we've really focused try to focus on the iPad. But I realized if it were me carrying around an iPad, like if I needed something immediately, I wouldn't want to have to go get my iPad out when I could just point to it or get it myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know, you had said if he wants something out of the cupboard, he can just get it. He's 18 years old. I guess I don't really quite understand why you would even feel like you had to make that statement, because, you know, autonomy does exist, right? Do you think that there's stigma or something in the community you're more immersed in? Because again, I don't have children. I'm not a caregiver, and I I'm more like your younger son. I'm on that opposite end of the spectrum. Just because someone is nonverbal or may have more profound autism, they still deserve to have autonomy over their life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say he did ABA. He started at the age of 2, and the first program he was in was wonderful. It was an inclusive program, so there was, and I don't like using this term, but neurotypical peers, and then 3 kids with autism in a classroom. And so he was immersed with neurotypical peers, and so that worked out really well for him because and I know this sounds terrible, but he prefers to be around verbal kids. Because I think in his head, he can understand everything. He also has issues with screaming and emotion. He is like very, very sensitive. We were talking about this before. He's super sensitive. So we did, after he was there, we tried to put him in regular school, and of course because he's nonverbal, immediately he goes into the severe profound room. Like there's just there's no question about it. He was in thankfully he was in an inclusive pre-K, and that worked out really well, but as he got older we knew it was going to be tougher, so I tried to create my own program at a private school so I could keep him in an inclusive environment, and it worked really well until he was about to go into middle school. And that's when verbal differences, because, when a child's 3, their differences with autism and the other 3-year-olds are not that noticeable. But when a child's 10 or older, you're going to see those differences more. And so the private school decided at that point that it wasn't going to work. And so he moved to public school, which I'm a big advocate for public school, but it has been harder to have him mainstreamed in an inclusive environment in high school. And I think that's been a little bit depressing for him, because I think he misses doing regular things. Like he enjoys doing he's like a regular teenager in a lot of ways. He comes home and wants to watch TV and lays on the sofa, or, he'll go to his room and watch TV, just because he has profound autism doesn't mean he's not, interested in similar things. Like he likes music, and he likes like TV shows that are he likes Cobra Kai and things like that of his age, I think there's this assumption that because he doesn't speak, that his IQ, that he's like, a baby. And he's 18, he's 6'4". He's my baby, but he's not a baby.
So, why, you said that that's a little bit depressing for him. Is the school wanting to segregate him, or do they allow him to be in the mainstream classes, or can you go into that a little more?
I think the school district he's in has really tried hard. They have inclusive classes. They've been very supportive. So I think it's more as he's gotten older, and I've noticed this with a lot of kids with autism, as they gain more awareness of the world around them, their anxiety levels go up, and that's the way for all of us. But with him, it was like high intensity. And he did also have pandas and then pans for a while. So we had some strange behaviors with that. He's got pretty severe OCD. In fact, the last time we had him evaluated, they actually gave him the main diagnosis of OCD, and he has profound autism, and that was secondary to his OCD diagnosis. So I think his OCD makes it difficult for him to be in a regular classroom as well. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations about autism and mental health, because I think we want to clump them all into one. Yeah. Especially with kids with autism. Like I said, they wanted to say, well, the nonverbal is autism. I really had to fight for that apraxia diagnosis. And the OCD diagnosis I didn't have to fight for, which I was really glad that we got somebody really understanding to give him evaluation. But a lot of people said, why would you want that diagnosis separate? You know, it could jeopardize him getting autism services. But it's true. You know, the OCD is a separate diagnosis, and it needs to be treated separately because it's a different approach to how you treat it. So
for people who might not know, what's apraxia?
Apraxia is probably the wrong person to ask, but it is a motor processing. I believe it's a motor processing issue where it's, for Rob, it's kind of like like I said, his brain knows what it wants to say, but when he tries to make the words, it doesn't come out right. However, when he's not thinking about it, the words sometimes just come out. So throughout his life, we've just heard these words come out of his mouth. Like one time he said, "I love you." And this is a child that's completely, you know, nonverbal. I will say he did have words when he was little. He that was how we caught it so young. We caught it when he was 15 months because he lost the language he had. But I think, like, if you ask him to say mom, he likes to say mum because I moved here from England, but sometimes he'll say bum instead of mum because he gets his M's and B's mixed up. But when he's not thinking about it, sometimes the word just comes out. He does say happy. That's one of the things that he's kept and says. But he breaks it down. He says happy, but it's just the sweetest thing. So I know it's all in there. It just and to me, it doesn't bother me that he can't. It bothers me that he struggles with the frustration of not being able to get those words out, because I know he would love to say a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah. I want to go back to where you said he's just like a regular teen in a lot of ways, because like you said, he's 18 years old. He comes home from school. He wants to lay on the couch. He wants to watch TV. What can people do to merge their understanding of, hey, this person may be different because they have OCD or because they are nonverbal, but like, you know, they're a regular teenager. You know, me personally, my own, you know, stuff, because we're all coming from our own experiences, is that's something that I would like for people to understand, is just because you have a difference doesn't mean you're not also in a lot of ways the same. You know, teenagers are teenagers, you know, no matter what they have going on. So, you know, what can people do to sort of stop looking at the differences and look at it more like it's 18-year-old, you know, it's teenager. You know?
Well, you know, and I noticed this with both my children. So the one who's high functioning has been kind of labeled, you know, weird because his interests are different from most of the kids his age. He also recently came out as being gay last year at 8. And so, and he's very vocal about it because he doesn't have a filter. And so it's been hard on him as well. It's been hard for both of them to really fit in. And that's where the acceptance piece comes in, and, you know, just having some understanding, patience, because OCD really can be trying on the patience. It's, you know, it sometimes takes a little bit longer to do things, and because he's got routines and very rigid routines. But Rob is really perceptive. He picks up on people. So if you're relaxed with him, and you're kind to him, he feels that and he relaxes. And that's one of the things with apraxia. I think the more nervous and anxious you are, the harder it is to get those words out. When you're more relaxed, you're not thinking about it. I think it's just easier for him to do things and to be himself. But the school he goes to does have a great program where they pair kids that are neurotypical with kids in special education, and usually the kids they pair are football players or cheerleaders, or and that I think has been really a good project, because these kids get a chance to know Rob, and they like him, and he gets a chance to be around, regular peers, and he likes them. So it's like a win-win situation. I ran into one, they call them service learners. I ran into one service learner that had graduated. She was a cheerleader, and from that experience, she decided to become a special education teacher, which just blew me away. I thought that was wonderful, because she said that it was such an eye-opening experience for her. So taking that time to kind of get to know the person, instead of, looking at this or the diagnosis. So,
because that's what all people want, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be seen, whether or not you come across as neurotypical or normal, or you are different. Me at 34 years old, I've sort of come to realize that that's one of those things everyone, despite whatever we have going on or makes us different, is we're all human and we all want to be seen, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's great. Let's talk about your younger child for a second. So you said that they just came out as gay. Mm-hmm. Now, that experience, speaking from the parent perspective, if there's a parent out there watching or listening, and their child is going through that, how can they help their child? You said that that's hard for your younger child too. So what can someone do to support their child?
Really, it's not been hard for him.
Oh, great.
Because he's really proud and very outspoken about it. I think this year has been a little bit harder for him because he's experienced some homophobia.
In the school setting?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's been a little bit hard for him because he's so open about it, and he just doesn't understand why anyone would have a problem with it, which is, I get. I don't understand why anyone would have a problem with it either. But before he started school, I remember telling him, I was like, okay, so not everybody, because I'm originally from Toronto, and we went to Toronto Pride this summer, and everybody was so accepting. So I think he thought, like, I can go into school and everybody's going to be accepting like this. So I think on the first day he told everybody he was gay, which I think is really sweet, but I don't think it's gone over very well for him. It's been really hard for him to make friends. He already feels a little weird, and I hate using the word neurotypical because I don't feel like I'm neurotypical. I don't think anybody's normal. We're all different in our own ways, but he likes sort of different things. He's a little bit more mature than most of the kids his age, and so that just added another stigma on top of it. I don't think he feels the autism stigma yet because his autism is so mild. I think people so that was my, I was going to say that was how I experienced the other side of autism, because Rob's autism is very apparent, my older son, being profoundly affected, but Sam's was so mild that it comes across as being a behavioral issue. Mm-hmm. He's being a bad kid, when it's not. It's more complex than that. But I have just been incredibly accepting of him and loving of him, because to me, he's the same boy. Yeah. It's really not changed him in any way. But I have noticed a lot of people really have a difficult time with an 8-year-old being gay. And it's like, but you don't have a problem with an 8-year-old saying, I have a 8-year-old boy saying, I have a girlfriend. They think that's cute. And we think that's okay, but how can an 8-year-old think that they're gay, and how can you support that? Well, I'm going to support him whatever. If he changes his mind, if he doesn't, I'm going to support him no matter what. He's my son. So, he asked to go to Pride. We went to Pride, and he did not enjoy it because it was a little sensory overload. Yeah. I don't think it's what he expected, but I'm really proud of all my children, and I'm proud of him being so young and being able to notice and feel those feelings and be honest about them and come out that way. That's a difficult thing for even an adult. So for an 8-year-old to have that confidence. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking before we started rolling, and I've talked to other people about this. There is that stereotype that people with autism have no empathy, when in fact it's quite the opposite. And can you talk about your personal opinion on that for a minute? Because I just like getting people's experiences on that.
Yes, I believe that kids with autism and adults with autism have more empathy. And in fact, my oldest son, who's nonverbal, I almost think that because he does not have the verbal abilities, that it's almost heightened his perceptiveness. Like he has got this like sixth sense. He is very perceptive. He can pick up on your moods. He can pick up on so we have to keep things like this because he can feel everything. And I imagine that's part of the reason why he struggles with mental health issues, because when you feel everything so intensely, that starts to weigh on you. The little one, I think, is starting to experience that more, but not to the extent of my oldest one. I think my oldest one, who's more profoundly affected, is extremely perceptive and empathetic. Of course, he's older, but the little one is very sensitive too. He's just, very aware of everything going on around him, and so that heightens your anxiety, and it can also add to, depression and other issues because you're feeling all these feelings around you. So.
Oh
yeah.
I just say that from experience. No, but I just always like getting people's input on that because I wholeheartedly agree. And me personally, growing up with autism and, still obviously having it today because it's not something that goes away. I do think that I'm very perceptive. I agree with what you're saying about being able to just I may not, understand the body language and all the facial expressions, and I've had to really teach myself, how to get along with that. But energy, right? I mean, it exists. That's a scientific fact. They've proven about energy. And I do think, I'm very susceptible to like what you're saying, your son Rob, like if somebody's angry or happy or it's like I'm like, oh no, what's going on over here, and then also being sensitive in the things that happen to us and being aware that we are different.
Yeah.
Like your younger son Sam, you're saying he's starting to be able to pick up on that.
It's that uncomfortableness that they pick up on. I feel like a positive example would be my son's rheumatologist. Like, it's hard to go to the doctor with Rob, my older one, because of his OCD. His rheumatologist and her nurses are wonderful. They treat him so wonderfully. We've had really great teams of providers, but he goes in there and just is smiling the whole time. And she's like, "Why is he so happy?" I said, "Because you're so kind to him and you talk to him and you're nice to him, and he feels that. He feels that. I feel it. As his mom, he picks up on that. But and the flip side is he picks up when people are uncomfortable around him and nervous around him. So that makes him, apprehensive and nervous. And I understand, people feel like he's a big guy as well. But that's where we can help people with autism, is just easing up a little bit. Get to know these kids, get to know these adults, because when you have that tense stand, it's going to make them more tense.
Yeah.
I almost said me too, because it does make me more tense. I'm the same way.
That's what I was going to say. Again, I feel like anyone listening, watching, I feel like that's almost kind of like a human experience. Like if someone walks into a room and the vibe is off, you don't autism or not, you can pick up on that, you know. And I think I'm learning my own personal opinion is that, you know, a lot of these things that maybe harder for people with autism or whatnot are also, again, because autism is a spectrum, on that other side of the spectrum of humanness are also things that, you know, quote unquote neurotypical people can in a sense relate to, like stimming. I see so many people that jiggle their leg.
Yes, I do that.
Exactly. You know, and they don't have autism, or, you know, they're biting their nails, or when you're scared, I think a way to shatter stigmas personally that I've come to find is those things that make us human, that we all do to some extent. If we relate them to people who have autism, it helps them understand. And, you know, because what you're saying is the perceptiveness, we all do that as human beings, or at least my opinion, but I'm also coming from it as a person with autism. So, but I want to talk a little bit about you as a parent and a caregiver. How has being a parent of two children and on complete opposite sides of the spectrum, like you said, how has that been for you personally? And has that affected your mental health at all?
It has, for sure. I mean, I struggled with mental health issues as a teenager. And I work in mental health now, but there is caregiver burnout, particularly when a child needs like that extra help. Rob is very profoundly affected. He still needs help with, you know, taking showers and brushing his teeth and things like that, which I think a lot of people on the other side, on like Sam's side, because Sam doesn't need help. Sometimes he needs a little help because he's still young, but he really doesn't need a lot of help with that. And so I think, you know, a lot of people forget that as caregivers, you know, a lot of us are working jobs, are caring for other children and dogs and things like that. And then having to do these extra things, it's a lot. And so it creates this caregiver burnout. And having been working in the autism profession for a while, I did notice a lot of parent shaming, which kind of pushed me out of working specifically within direct care and the autism, because I don't agree with that. I think, you know, pushing the parent out is not going to help the child. Most parents I've met want the best for their kids, and all they are doing is trying to help their kids. Sometimes we make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Exactly.
But, you know, every parent makes mistakes. But most parents, I think, really are trying their hardest to help their kids. We're not trying to, you know, hurt them or have them abused. We did do ABA, which I know is controversial, but we did it quite a while ago. And the people that he worked with were almost like family members to us. So we were really part of it. And so it was not abusive at all. We don't do it anymore. My opinion is ABA's changed a little bit, and it needs to become more trauma-informed because we're also dealing with mental health issues. But that's a whole other subject. But with caregivers, I mean, that's part of the reason, like I said, why I left. I was working in ABA. I was going through to become a BCBA, and I noticed a lot of the caregivers were either blamed for children's behaviors or not included in the process, or were struggling themselves and not given support. And mental health was just completely ignored. And that is not appropriate, in my opinion. So that was why I got into mental health, because I was like, somebody's got to support these kids and the caregivers. Because if the caregivers are burnt out and they're stressed out, then they're not going to be able to parent these kids the way that they need to be parented. And it's just a reality. But I feel like the autism world has it just has shifted to this, you know, anti-parent, anti-mom movement, which, you know, that bothers me, because we should have a voice at the table, especially when you have a child that's nonverbal. I don't think it's fair for somebody who just has, they have autism. Like Sam wouldn't be able to speak for Rob. He might know him a little bit better than, some stranger, but to have a stranger say, I know your child better than you, no.
That's false.
You don't. I know him better than you. And Rob can speak for himself, but sometimes he can't. And so I have to advocate for him, and I'm never going to stop doing that. So I'm a mama bear, and I'm always going to fight for him. And nothing's going to stop that. So,
no, yeah.
But we do need to include caregivers, and we do need to support them.
I completely agree. I really do. When I was diagnosed at 9, I was diagnosed with Asperger's. It was still a diagnosis back then, and quite frankly, I bounce back and forth between saying I have autism and I have Asperger's because, that's how I was diagnosed. That's how I was raised. When there was like nothing back in the day really at all for my parents or myself. When I was diagnosed, they were like, all right, she's got Asperger's and depression and all these other things, so good luck.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in this shift in the autism world. I mean, even for me, I get backlash and hate on the internet if someone sees me say I have Asperger's. I get told, oh, well, you're not an advocate. You can't be in the community because you say you have Asperger's. You can't say that. And it's like, well, who are you to tell me how I can identify with my own diagnosis?
Absolutely.
You're trying to take my voice from me, and that's not correct. And I see that a lot with parents. And like you said, no one else knows your child better than you do. They're your child, autism or not. I think, like you said, all parents are trying their best. Parents make mistakes. All people make mistakes. And I do think parents and caregivers deserve a seat at the table 100% because like you said, sometimes your son can speak for himself, other times he cannot. Who better to speak for him than you? And I also want to take it back a second. You said, you're taking care of your kids and your dogs and everything. You're also taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Because you're a human being. So what are some ways that you show yourself wellness? And I know you said you struggled with mental health as a teenager, and so when your own mental health struggles are coming up or you're experiencing caregiver burnout, for other parents and caregivers listening, what are some ways that you are cognizant of that? How do you take care of yourself? Can you talk about that for?
Well, first of all, I'm awful at taking care of myself. I need to practice self-care more. But and I'm probably going to get backlash for saying I had worked in the ABA community, but I moved from ABA actually to social work. I'm going through to be an LCSW, and I work in a children's crisis center. And I have moved towards focusing more on mental health. So I think that has helped me a lot because I have a really supportive workplace, and I see a therapist myself every week that understands autism, and that has helped immensely. But it is really hard for us to get time to operate self-care, especially working parents, or parents of young kids when they're doing therapies, and then then it's like their life sort of revolves around that. I'm doing my master's right now too, so it's like I'm working masters my kids. Like as soon as I get home, it's full on because Rob still requires that level of care. So it really is hard to fit in that self-care. What I'm trying to do is to try to include my kids in that self-care so we can do self-care together, and do mindfulness and practice self-compassion, because it is a hard journey. And I don't think the autism community makes it easy on anybody, and that is something we need to try to stop, because we're just hurting each other. If we worked more collectively, we could get so much more done. And it's just this idea that everybody's out to get everybody. It's not that way. We all want to help each other. The clinic I work in, I would say there's a large amount of kids that come in there that are on the spectrum. We also have a lot of kids that are LGBTQ and on the spectrum as well. So, you know, we need to look at ways to support not only our kids, but the caregivers. I've actually met caregivers that have come in that have autism, and they're trying to care for a child that has, you know, a mental illness or mental health condition, and that's a lot. So, you know, it's so complex. I think we need to stop, you know, judging people and shaming people. I just see that constantly in our community, and it's sad.
No, I agree with you. I think we need to, I don't know, I'm on a kick lately of focusing on our humanness.
Yes.
You know, if we can just focus on our humanness, you know, and then especially in the autism community, I mean, parent, caregiver, Asperger's, autism, level 1.
You never know what to say. People first.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, you know, what you're saying is very true. Like, if we just come together more collectively, because at the end of the day, aren't we all fighting for the same outcome, which is for it to be seen, and for us all to be heard, and for us all to be, you know, pushing towards a way to make the world more inclusive and supportive and all of these things. And, you know, suicide rates for autistic people or people with autism, however you want to say it, are extremely high. And then on the other hand, the suicide rates for parents and caregivers of those with autism are extremely high. So when you look at it that way, which I don't think a lot of people do, we're one and the same there as well. And all of our mental health matters. And so many people that I meet, like yourself, we've dedicated not only our lives but our professional careers to helping people like me, like your children, like yourself. And isn't that so great, you know? And
I completely changed my career. I worked in the music industry before I moved. I lived in England, worked in the music industry before I moved here. And his diagnosis completely changed my life for the better, I will say. You know, I moved into advocacy and then nonprofit work, and then, you know, I tried doing therapy for a bit, and now this mental health line that I've chosen, it's all inspired by all three of my children. Because siblings, you know, my daughter is in the middle, and she has an autoimmune disorder, and, you know, all three of my kids have autoimmune disorders, but and as well as their autism. So she was, you know, a baby when Rob was diagnosed, and so she grew up like with therapists around, and me really focused on Rob, and so I think she felt left out a lot. So the siblings also face a lot of mental health issues. But, you know, something I've also noticed is a lot of the parents probably could be diagnosed with autism themselves. So, you know, to say, well, caregivers don't have any idea what it's like, well, a lot of them probably are on the spectrum and don't know. And yeah, I'm noticed now that, like, now I have two, I'm noticing, my brother may have Asperger's too. See, and see, when Rob was diagnosed Asperger's, they actually thought he had Asperger's because he was so verbal when he was young, and he has profound autism. So there you go. But I think we need to stop getting hung up on these terms and on who's right and who's wrong, because at the end of the day, everybody is an individual.
Yeah.
And it's that you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. You meet one person, you meet one person. We are all people, and we are all different. So let's just embrace that difference and stop trying to say, I know better than you, you know better than me, because that is, I think, only creating more mental health issues, not just for caregivers, but for people with autism themselves who already don't fit in, you know, being told this is how you need to be. So, yeah, we're kind of creating some of our own issues in our community.
No, it's true. But conversations like this, and advocacy and the work you're doing, I mean, those are the things that we can do, right? To try and offset that. And I think this has been a lovely conversation. And before we wrap it up, is there anything else you'd like to let Everybody knows.
Yes. So now that I'm in social work, I've really been moving towards advocating for more mental health services for people with autism and their families. I'm very lucky to be part of a new project through the Department of Mental Health and Central Oklahoma Community Mental Health Center. It's the Children's Urgent Recovery Center, and we are autism friendly, which every mental health center I think should be. But I'm proud to say that our therapist has experience in autism, and of course I have experience with autism. But what I've noticed is all the staff there, even though they hadn't been trained, they all just intrinsically they know what to do, and they just are so loving and understanding. Like we were saying, they come at it that way that I was just, it moves me to tears sometimes, because I think of all the times I could have used support when Rob was having meltdowns, and I didn't have that, and to now be part of a place that provides that support is really meaningful. And I'm told it's supposed to be replicated in every county across the state. So I hope that every URC will have autism training, because there is a huge correlation, of autism and mental health issues. I think they say it's 78%, but I believe it's higher than that.
Yeah.
So we've got to start addressing this. And like you said, with suicide rates, I mean, we've got to help our kiddos. So.
No, we do. I think, we really do. And I think it starts young. And I can't help but notice through a personal project we're doing at AFO that every adult I talk to with autism that struggles with suicidality issues, myself included, bullying is a factor.
Yeah, we see that a lot at our center too.
I bet.
Particularly because there are a lot of kids that are on the higher end of the spectrum that are also trans. And I think part of it, my thought process is part of it is they don't have the gender constraints as neurotypical kids do. So they don't understand why it's such an issue. But they're being bullied at school for not only having autism, but being trans or being LGBTQ. And it's really an issue. These kids are really hurting. To see a 5-year-old that has suicidal ideation, it's not
normal.
That's not good. And that's where we're at. So that's why we have to stop with the fighting and start with the supporting initiatives like this, where we have discussions, because that's super important. The more we discuss it, then hopefully the more support we can get. And I am all for acceptance. We were talking about my post. I'm a huge supporter of acceptance because I want my kids to be accepted and included. But I'm also an advocate for awareness, for advocacy, for action, because there is so little for adults with profound autism like Rob. I really don't know what I'm going to do for him. I'm probably going to have to leave the state because there's so little here. So we have to continue to advocate. We can't just say, no, we just need acceptance. It's not just acceptance. We need all of it. So.
And a part of acceptance I'm realizing is calling your legislators.
Yes.
Sending them emails, going into their offices, telling them what you need, demanding that they listen to you. I'm just going to say this because I studied public policy, and also I'm a firm believer of it, and we heard it yesterday at an advocacy event we were at. Public officials, legislators, senators, representatives, they've been elected by the people to serve the people. Your public offices, they're for you. And they serve you, and I think a lot of the time people forget that elected officials serve us. We don't serve them. They don't serve themselves. So I'm learning that a big part of acceptance is also just straight up making your elected officials know who you are, whether they like you or not.
Absolutely.
Because their job is to do what you want.
Yeah.
That's
I
cool.
absolutely agree, and I will tell you, our House representative, who's no longer a House representative, I made sure every time he was campaigning, I brought Rob out to meet him. He knew Rob very well.
Yeah.
He's the one that ran the autism insurance reform bill, and he knew my son already because I made sure he knew. He every time we would talk about it, and every time he'd kind of pass it over, but then he didn't pass it over. And we were on different sides of the political spectrum, but he still understood. That he knew Rob as a human, so it crosses that, and it's so important. And it's so important that we also advocate positively. And I know that's hard sometimes when you're full of emotion, but when I remember when we first went to the Capitol to talk about autism, nobody knew what autism was. So just starting with education is so important.
Yes.
So again, less judgment and shaming, and more education, and coming at it in a positive way of introducing your child, telling them about your child, your personal story, instead of going into attack mode. I know.
Yes. No. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm a mama bear. I feel the attack mode come on sometimes too, but that's not how we get things done.
Yeah.
So.
But no, you even said it, opposite ends of the spectrum. But that humanness. I mean, I think it really, a lot of things can come down to focusing on that humanness, despite our differences. So
yeah, he still messages me to see how my son is doing, even though he's no longer in office, which, again, like, politically we're like over here, but I appreciate his dedication, and I think having known my son made it personal to him. So we need to keep doing that. We need to keep making sure that these our legislators know our children and know our struggles too.
Yeah.
So that we can, get support, because we do need action.
yeah, no, I agree. Anyway, this has been a wonderful conversation. I can't wait to get you back so we can talk more on some of these topics we preached on today. But if it's okay with you, I'll put that information for the crisis center in the description of the episode, in case anyone living in the OKC Metro needs to seek services.
We're located in Norman, but we can serve anybody from around the state.
Okay.
We also do mobile crisis, but that is only within the Norman area. So we serve Cleveland, McLean, I think a few other counties in that area. So, but it will be replicated, and I'm really hoping that the other URCs are as wonderful as this one. So I'm really happy to be part of it, and hopefully changing the direction of some of these kiddos' lives.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carley.
No, this was great. And I do just want to say really quickly, I have noticed that this podcast is being watched and streamed all over the world. So I really appreciate that. And I know that we are in Oklahoma, and some of the topics and things that we talk about and resources that we share are Oklahoma related. But if you are in America and you are in crisis and you need somebody to talk to now, you can dial 988 and get connected to somebody in under 11 seconds. So please, if you're in crisis, pick up the phone, dial 988, and other than that, we will see you next time. Thank you again. Thank you again for tuning in to Unmasking Autism with AFO. I'm your host, Carley Marissa Dummett. Thank you again to the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And for any information on our trainings or our events, please visit www.autismfoundationok.org or follow us on social media platforms at Autism Foundation OK. As always, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.